Now, I've always found it really hard not to skew my perception of The Last of Us Season 2, even before any of the trailers dropped or anything like that. I'm a massive fan of the first game, and personally I really thought that the second game dropped the ball, so going into this season of TV, knowing that they've been pretty spot on with the storyline so far compared to the games, I was a little bit concerned about what they were going to do here. And lo and behold, it has happened. Joel has unfortunately met his demise to the 5'0" Abby in the show. Now, before we pick this apart and highlight why this might not have necessarily been the best thing to do, regardless of your thoughts of the games or not, I will say, if you are a fan of just the show, and you're like one of the 2% of people that hasn't played the games and is watching the show, this must have massively just thrown you through a spiral. Like, there is no way that you would expect something like this to happen, especially in the way it happened as well. Now, obviously, as fans of the games, you would have known that this moment would have been coming. I mean, I will argue that maybe we wouldn't have expected it to happen this soon. The first episode we got of this season was very much of a catch-up, sort of bit of a slog, way more slower pace than I expected. But this episode absolutely exploded. There was lots of action, which was actually done very well, and then obviously that iconic scene. I do really like the fact that the clickers actually really feel like a menacing threat towards everyone this episode, especially in their vast numbers. It felt like in the first episode, obviously this is with Ellie being just weird, but it felt like they were just kind of like a mild inconvenience, like they didn't really pose any threat to anyone. Obviously Ellie's immune, so it doesn't matter to her, but just generally speaking, it felt like they really weren't getting much of a focal point. I remember something similar happening in The Walking Dead as the seasons got on. The actual problems weren't really the zombies, it was more the other survivors. So actually seeing the clickers be a threat and seeing some really good action sequences was a really nice sort of backdrop to the other storyline going on, obviously revolving around Joe and Ellie and Abby. Now, I will give the show props regarding how they've set up this event. To me, it feels like it has been built towards way better than it was in the games. Abby's got a legitimate reason to hunt down and kill Joel, right? Like, her motive is really fleshed out. She's just an incredibly vengeful daughter, which you can honestly kind of sympathise with. I've got to say, the actress has done a fantastic job at showing that emotion in such a short space of time. And when you do contrast this to obviously the same event happening in the game, it feels as if that comes completely out of left field. I'll be honest, I thought it would take longer than 2 episodes of the show to actually get to this resolution, especially with how slow the first episode was. But in what we've seen of Abby's motive so far, it is way more fleshed out already. Similarly, the way that Joel is actually identified in the show is way more realistic than in the games. In the games, he's just kind of an idiot and just gets tracked down, right? Whereas here, he's actually identified by Dina calling out his name in Abby's presence, which essentially just alerts Abby to the fact of, oh, this is the guy I'm looking for. It's just way more natural than the actual games themselves. However, one of the big issues I do have with this scene, and granted, it's not really anyone's fault, more the casting department, but I can't visualise Abby, this 5'2", honestly as thin as anything girl, being this intimidating antagonist throughout the rest of the series. Like, it's just feels like it's such a far representation from what we have in the games, right? Like, Abby in the games is an absolute hunk, and granted, in an actual zombie apocalypse, is that realistic? Probably not, but that is the way the game is portrayed and how it works, and it does make sense in the game that you can have this big brooding female absolutely plaster Joel's head in. Again, I just want to clarify, as an actress, whoever plays Abby is brilliant. Sorry, I don't actually know her name. And the performance she has done has been great, but genuinely, it's like casting The Rock to play Queen Elizabeth II. It's just so off, and I don't see how a fearless crew that she sort of ensembles in this show is intimidated by this ruthless leader, which is honestly just like fun size. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. I still find it unbearably frustrating that Joel at no point has ever thought to speak up for his actions in any capacity. He obviously got chewed out by the therapist and by Ellie last episode, and now in this episode he's literally getting, well, murdered for the actions of the first season, where he obviously killed Abby's dad. However, it's completely justified. Don't get me wrong, I get Abby as a revengeful sort of daughter and will just do whatever, doesn't really matter. But you think at one point he might say, you know, with his life on the line, oh yeah, by the way, I did kill your dad, but he was going to kill this helpless girl and try and make a cure which could potentially make everybody immune and stuff, but it was very unlikely to do so. But at no point that comes out of his mouth. Again, I guess that is accurate because that's kind of the same as the games, but that would have been a glorious opportunity to improve upon this section of the show. My other main concern now that Joel has obviously kicked the bucket is the fact that the whole show will now revolve around Ellie, which it obviously kind of did anyway, but there's not that focal point from Pedro Pascal present. I know we'll probably be there for a couple of flashback scenes later on in the season, but for the most part, this show is going to rely on Bella Ramsey, who plays Ellie, carrying it. Now, I don't think she'll be able to hold a show of this on her own as an actress. I think she's relatively talented, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that her portrayal of Ellie is very good at all. Now, this isn't getting into like a political thing. I have no issue with all of the themes incorporated in the show, even though they are being handled kinda haphazardly and kinda shoved down your throat in some regards. But still, it's more about as an actual actress herself. I don't think her depiction of Ellie is really that likeable, particularly when you compare it to Ellie in the actual video games, and I'm afraid that not having the star power present of Pedro Pascal will just cause the season to fall off and decline in viewers. I know it is a bit of a meme that Pedro Pascal is literally in everything right now, but in all fairness to him, he is quite a good actor, so it does make sense, and he did really faithfully portray Joel very well. Even though I still can't understand why he can't speak up for himself, he's still done a cracking job. But what do you guys think? Do you think it was the right decision for the show to be this faithful to the games and kill off Joel in this capacity? Do you think it was handled worse or better than the games? Personally, I do think it was handled a little bit better, but I do still think it's the wrong choice for the show moving forward, and funnily enough, really didn't like the way they did it in the games either. Anyway, let me know your thoughts down below, and if you are new here and you have enjoyed, please do consider subscribing because it really does help out the channel. Thanks ever so much for watching, hope to see you in another video sometime soon.